Are you looking for a device that can play Game Boy Color, retro arcade games, and even some PSP games? Well, you're in luck, because this is the Powkiddy RGB20SX, and they have made some giant upgrades. Before we press play here, we are giving away a teal Steam Deck at the end of May. If you'd like to be considered, subscribe down below and check the community tab at the end of May. Now let's take a look at this long, orange, odd aspect ratio style handheld. That's right, this looks very nice. It's got a huge screen at the top of this thing, and if you find some content that'll actually fill the entire screen up, I think this is a very interesting handheld. And while we're on the topic of hardware, we should just dive right into that, because I think this has a very good set of hardware, but has some odd caveats. And what I mean by caveats are, this thing is a chungus. It is a 4-inch 720 by 720 pixel screen, which is very nice, but this thing is massive, and not in a bad way, but definitely in a way you may not want to shove it in your pocket versus the Miyoo Mini Plus. But we're not here to talk about the current reigning champion. We're going to talk about how these buttons feel. And on this device, we have a D-pad that is squishy, not clicky. We have A, B, X, Y buttons that are also squishy, not clicky. We have two start and select buttons that are clicky and not squishy, in addition to a function button that kind of looks like a mouth, which is very clicky. And it also has a power indicator light for the nose, in addition to a speaker hole right at the center, which is nice and loud. We have two sunken in switch style joysticks that are clicky and not squishy. On the right hand side here, we have a SD card slot for the OS of the device and the volume rocker up and down, which is clicky and not squishy. The left hand side of the device, we have a power and reset switch, which also are clicky and not squishy, in addition to your game SD card slot. This is where you'll put all of your ROMs from your ROM library. It does come preloaded with some as well. On the bottom, we have two USB-C ports and a headphone hole. The left one is for charging and the right one is for, I'm assuming, data. The top of the device has a mini HDMI port and not a micro HDMI port. And on the back, we have 4 different trigger buttons. We have L1, R1, L2, and R2. The L1 and R1 are closer to the sides of the device and have a little bit less of a slope, while the L2 and R2 are a little bit larger and stick up farther, so when you're not looking at the device, you can tell which is which. These are also huge and spaced out, and I don't think you're really going to get confused, and they are all clicky and not squishy. That's it for all of the functions and physical device overview, and I really still can't decide if this thing is orange or yellow. It seems right in between. So all of the controls on this device feel very nice, but it makes you wonder, with this being so large and the screen being so tall, what is the point of this device? I like that it's bigger and it's in the style of a Game Boy, which some people do like, but what is the point of the device? Is this supposed to be an all-in-one emulator, or is this supposed to be a very niche device meant for specific things like arcade or Game Boy Color? And having that weird aspect ratio style screen means that it's going to be tougher to find content to make it feel at home on this device. So let's dive into the software and see what's actually running well on this device. And there are plenty of things that do run well on this device, but the issue is that 1:1 aspect ratio screen. That 720 by 720 screen is only going to jive well with things that are square. So your Game Boy Advance games, they're not going to fly here. You can play them, but then you have black bars at the top and bottom. And to be honest, the blacks are pretty deep on this screen, so it didn't really bother me that much. If this is your handheld that you're playing at home or something like that, it's not that big of a deal. This is true with all the 8 and 16-bit devices and backwards. All of those are totally fine and playable on this device. Where we start getting into some differences is in the N64 and PS1 eras of things. A lot of these game libraries will play on this device, but you're going to have differences of how you want it to look. So you can either do it in a way where you just have the black bars at the bottom, or you can scale it and kind of just deal with it either being squished or stretched in a different direction. Either way, this device has enough power to place most of these consoles. And then moving on to the consoles of Nintendo DS and PSP. The Nintendo DS runs very well on this device, but the problem we have here is this screen is not a touchscreen, but I think they do pretty well with getting over how this actually runs. They've used the back triggers to map to the changing the screens and changing between the screens and changing the sizes of the screen so that you can go between them pretty quickly and it's no big deal. Playing games like Pokemon on here was really not that bad, and I would not mind playing through that game on this device. The screen does look very nice, and the pixel sizing is actually not that bad. The two Nintendo DS screens, all of the Nintendo DS's had tons of different size screens, and these games looked different on different screens, so as long as you're okay with how this looks, I thought I was fine with the gameplay. Now moving on to PSP. This doesn't pass the God of War test, but it can play PSP games. Now, how much you actually want to do that is up to you. This screen is not made for PSP games. If you're looking for something that is going to play PSP collection completely, you're going to want to look for something that has a little bit more power, like the Retroid Pocket 4, most of the Retroid Pocket lineups, or grab yourself an old PSP from eBay and mod yourself a console. The entire library of games here is running on Jealous OS, and I think they do a very nice job of putting all of this together in a nice, visually appealing way, even though it's kind of weird on this square aspect ratio screen, even though it looks nice. As you just saw, if you find the right content for this device, you can actually have a very good gaming experience on this device. But if you're trying to get this, even though it plays all the way up to the PSP with power-wise, it's really not meant for anything that's going to be 16:9. And even the DS on this handheld is kind of odd because you still have the two screens. Now you can stack them on top of each other and make them pretty big, but it still feels a little bit odd because we don't have a touchscreen here, and the square aspect ratio of the screen won't actually fill up the device completely anyway. Now this makes me think, what are the things that I like and dislike about this device specifically, because it feels like it has a bunch of niche use cases. So the things I specifically like are the build, the ease of use, and how this actually feels in your hands. Because of its larger size, which we've talked a lot about in this video, feels more like a rugged tank versus some of the smaller devices that you feel like, I drop this once, this thing's gonna break. With that being said though, I think this is one of the downfalls of the device itself, because most people in this price category are going to be looking for something small they could just jam in your pocket and not really pay a whole ton for. Now, this being so large compared to all of the other things in the market is going to put it in a category of buy it if you like the size versus buy it because it has these standout features and it is a good value proposition. Making me think this is actually a pretty good device for me because I have larger hands, and when I'm playing on the smaller consoles, I tend to kind of cramp up my fingers a bunch because the Miyoo Mini Plus and the Ambernic devices, they're all a little bit smaller and they are more pocketable and more portable, but this feels like more of a at-home console and something you would like to play and put back on your shelf versus jamming in your pocket. And if you're looking to put them back on your shelf, I do have stands that I've made for the devices so that you don't see the stand, but you get to see all of the device. So you pick it up, play your device, put it right back down, no big deal. I will have those in the link in the description if you'd like to find out how to get those. And while we are shilling out, litnxt.com sent this over to me for review, which I do appreciate, so if you'd like to pick up this handheld, it is down in the description below. You can also find it at other sites for different prices. I want to come back to it being a home-based emulator. With this being so large, I wouldn't really feel comfortable putting this in my bag versus putting something smaller in addition to something else. Putting something this large into my bag, I can realistically put the Nintendo Switch Lite or something around the same size volume, but will play more games. In addition to that, I also tended to like the content that was arcade style, some DS, and Game Boy Color games that filled up the entire screen completely and made it feel like it was more designed for this console versus having all the black bars or pixels being super squished or pushed one way or the other. It made it feel much more interesting playing it this way, and this is where I think the console feels most at home. And while this screen is pretty cool, I'll be diving into other games in the collection that I really haven't played before, so I'd be interested to see what other content you all would recommend by putting them down in the description of either Game Boy Color or arcade games that I really should play now that I have a screen that will look fantastic with them. If you're looking for this device or looking for another device that maybe has a horizontal form factor or is a smaller form factor like the Miyoo Mini Plus, check out these videos because we've done a slew of different reviews on very similarly powered and priced handhelds, so check these out. They only smell for the first few seconds and we really can't figure out why, but give them a click. They're free to watch, and all we know is people can't stop smelling them. They smell like something. We're not sure what it is. Maybe scent ou de pickle? That's all I got.